So we're going to talk about the Kodiak Summit, and I know that you're all interested primarily in attending the Hazelton Betty Ford event that's going to happen on the 25th. So I'm Sandi Jackson, and I've been coordinating the summit for the last 3.5 years. And when we got this idea to have Hazelton come in, it was as a developmental piece for our coalition, which means that this is not a newcomers event. Hazelton Betty Ford coming to Kodiak is a result of hours of their reading a mess of material on our summit and what we've done, hours of time with me and with other people on the leadership team, interviewing people that are going to participate to make sure that what they're presenting for us in Kodiak fits with where we are in Kodiak. Their reaction to us when we first started talking with them is that whenever their community development and training team goes into a community, they ordinarily leave recommending to the community that they accomplish what we have already accomplished. So this is exciting for them because they are jumping in to a working, existing coalition. So they ask specifically that we not have people who are not already engaged, because this is not to retell the story. When we get together on the 25th, it's not to rehash what we've already done. It's not to catch people up. So we've asked that anybody that's not been involved in the summit or that was at one point exposed to the summit but has been inactive, get caught up on what we're doing. That way, when we meet with the trainers on the 25th, everybody's kind of on the same page, maybe not the same paragraph, but they're kind of on the same page. We can hit the deck running. Then they're coming back the end of April to do a second piece, which will be for a smaller, more specific audience on trauma-informed care. Each of those 3 days will have a specific audience. The first day will be kind of Trauma 101, but then there'll be a day for first responders, and then which is a wide definition, by the way. And then there'll be a third day, which is focused on the organizational and agency pieces of things. So what we want to do with you today, Matt Kozak and I are going to do your presentation. I'm going to kind of give you the history, how we got started, where we are, what our theoretical premises are, what we accomplished in the first 3 years, and then Matt's going to take it over and he's going to explain how our coalition is shifting in its design and where we want to go for the next 3 years. We figure you need to go together. It's easy to go fast. Go by yourself, you go fast. But that's not what we're all about. Oh dear, here we go.
Space bar.
Space?
Space bar.
Space bar works, okay. So we're all in it together. So here's what the chief said, we're not going to wrest ourselves out of this mess. So if we're not going to wrest ourselves out of that mess, then we got to do something. So we have this little quote here from No Man is an Island, and I know you've heard it. It ends up with, so no one ask of me for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. So we know we're all in it together. This is our community, which is near and dear to us. So we ask for volunteers. This is a crazy piece of our summit. We're all volunteers. No one has to do this. No one is required to do this. This is strictly volunteer. So when we got together in 2016, we said, take off your agency hat. You're not here representing your agency, although I'll admit I just asked you who you represented. But the point is, we're not coming to represent an agency or an organization so much as we are to come as part of community. So that means you bring everything. You bring your education. We love it if you're well educated in this area. We ask for your professional experience. We ask for your personal experience. We ask for your passions. We ask for whatever expertise your agency's got that they're able to add to the project. We ask you to bring your frustrations, your ideas, your questions. And that means we've got to get some agreement here on what we believe. Well, we believe that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I tried to find who that is attributed to, and apparently it's Aristotle, but not exactly like this, but something along these lines. So here's what we decided. We're going to collaborate. You notice these are all verbs, because this is a working coalition. This is not a watch it coalition or a bystanders coalition. This is a bunch of people who actually work. We have very few meetings. We have 2 a year. One in the fall and one in the spring. We get everybody together, figure out what we're going to do, and then we just do it. We do it behind the scenes. We do it without a lot of fanfare. We do it without meetings. God, I hate meetings. And here we are. So we decided we're going to collaborate. We're not going to compete. We decided we're going to cooperate rather than be in conflict. You know, there's a lot of turf guarding that goes on in agencies. You don't want to let everybody know what you're doing, that kind of stuff. Well, we want to be transparent about it so that when we do something, we are supplementing what we have going on in community, not duplicating it. We want to work as a team. No Lone Rangers in this outfit. If you're a Lone Ranger, you are joining the wrong group here. We want to support each other, not sabotage it. We want to expand and improve services, not duplicate. We want to share resources, not hoard. For example, this last one, Ken is doing the videography and the photography for us this morning. I talked to the superintendent this morning, and he said, please let the videographer know that the resources in the district are at his disposal. So that's the level of collaboration that we really need to have. I wrote a grant initially for this training through HRSA. We had like 45 letters of support from every conceivable agency in town. That's because we will get somewhere if we work together. So where did we start? Well, here's where we started. We started in is that like a readable sort of thing? Okay, in 2016, there was a community needs assessment done on Providence that cited behavioral health and in particular substance abuse issues as the biggest unmet need in our community. So the mayors, Mayor Rohr of the borough and Mayor Branson, convened a summit. They brought in some outside people, some people from Alaska. They brought people in from epidemiology, from drug enforcement, lots of big high-level people to kind of get us up to speed on what we're up against. And then they put together a meeting of all of the stakeholders in this problem, local stakeholders in this problem. So that was our 2016 sort of thing. So our second phase was we had to decide, would you sign in please if you're just coming in? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, you just exited, I apologize. So we wanted to identify what our gaps in services are. Here's our theory. We can't build anything new until we stabilize our foundation. So we needed to figure out what we do well and what we don't do well. And in the part where we don't do so well, we want to improve. So we're going to figure out, so that took us a little while because most of us don't like to admit our shortcomings at the personal or the agency level when you get right down to it. But we had to do that because we can't add on a shaky foundation. So then, in 2018, we went into phase 3. That's where we wanted to really optimize what we have going on. In other words, let's do what we say we do really well. Because sometimes we say we do stuff, but we're not really doing it. And sometimes we're sort of doing it, but not really doing it. So we said, let's clean it up. If we say we're doing it, let's do a good job doing it before we try to add on to that. Then we went into this collective input. Now we listen to everybody in the world. We did presentations to over 750 people. We took our dog and pony show, and anybody that would listen to us, any special interest group, we would tell them all about what we're up against. We would tell them about the opioid crisis. We would tell them about the summit. We would tell them about resources. We would try to up the awareness, and we would get their input. Then we put it together in a plan, which we finalized in September, and then we went to work on it. And then in the fall, we came to our kind of conclusion of that 3-year period to evaluate how we've done, to where we wanted to go, and to kind of redefine our practice as a coalition. So we needed a configuration, of course. We can't just go after this. So this was our original configuration. We figured there were 3 key stakeholders. And there were a lot of, providers, and there were a lot of stakeholders, and that they fell into these particular domains. Kodiak Community Health Center, CANA, and the Counseling Center. These provide services for substance abuse and for mental health and all the comorbidities in between. And then we have all these special interest groups that support the provision. This first year, we looked at the nexus of justice and behavioral health. That was primarily the focus. Chief says we can't arrest ourselves out of it, then we got to provide services. So where do those two come together? So this is how we conceived our arrangement, but this is what it looked like in reality. Now, you can see we got providers on one side. Again, there's KCHC, Community Health, up at the top. They've got a medical department and a behavioral health department. Then we've got CANA. They've got a medical, a behavioral, and a prevention. Then we've got PKICC. They've got kind of ASAP. Is the ASAP coordinator here? Is he or she?
Right.
Oh, where? Who? What? Oh, there she is. Okay, super. So the ASAP person is kind of off to the side here because it's attached to PKICC, but it's not exactly a clinical delivery. It's more of a management thing. Then we got clinicians, we got the community support program, and we have Safe Harbor. Then on the other side of things, we have all these people and agencies that funnel people into the provider agencies. Now this was how we conceptualized it. There are a couple that we never actually drew in. We never drew in OCS. They're just too darn busy as far as I can tell, and they have a lot of turnover and a lot of turmoil, and they've just not had the time. They want to be engaged, but so far we haven't figured out how to get that job done. Teen Court did not engage yet, but Darlene's supposed to be here this morning. She should be here shortly, so we're getting them in. And Division of Juvenile Justice also never engaged. So we're kind of working on getting those in, and Matt will talk to you more about that. The college provided us help, school district, the tribal entities, obviously government, some of the other agencies that are community support, like CAMP is the Kodiak Area Mentoring Program, and for those of you who don't know about that, Women's Resource Center, the Salvation Army, the senior citizens, the public health nurses, we have their lead public health nurse, the Brother Francis Shelter, and the Kodiak Island Housing Authority. The DA's office tries to be involved as much as possible. They'll be sending their paralegals to one of our subsequent orientations here. And did I miss anybody? Adult probation and parole, of course, and the police station. So that's, now, we're going to have a different layout because we're moving in a slightly different direction. Matt's going to talk to you about that, but this is where we started. Here was our commitment. It doesn't matter what door you go in Kodiak, you get where you need to be. So what that means is if you come to see me and it's not what I provide, I will more hand off to where you need to be. If you come to me and I'm too busy, I will hand you off to somebody who isn't, or I will connect you with a support in the interim until if you actually need me, until you can get to me, that kind of thing. So as an agency, if you've got a wait list and somebody else doesn't, you get a hand off to them. Because one of the biggest complaints we got was that people couldn't get services in a timely fashion, windows of opportunity were not used well. So we committed to this, no matter what door you go in, you're going to get where you need to go. Okay, so then we had to define the problem. Well, you heard the story about the elephant, right? Elephant and the blind man? They're going to describe an elephant? Well, if you're the guy up there with the trunk, you say, well, it's kind of like a hose that's big at one end. And if you're the guy with the tail, well, it's kind of like a jump rope. It's kind of thin. If you're the guy up there on the ears, it's more like big leaves. So it really depends on which piece of the elephant you're touching. So that meant that we all saw it differently, and that's where that 750 people came in. They all saw it differently. They all saw a different piece of it. And that's why we have this mixed company in the summit. We want to hear and know about the dilemma from all perspectives. I'm a provider, 46 years. I look through a provider window. That's my window. I am not an addict in recovery. My son is an addict in recovery, 15 years, one day at a time, thanks be to God. He looks through it through a different window. He's also a provider, so he can look through my window. He's just not in it as long as I am, so he's got a smaller window. But I can't look through his. He has to tell me what he sees. I can tell you what I see through the mom window. I know a lot about that part. But I'm not an officer. I can't tell you what that window, what it looks like through that window. So we have to come together. So we listen to 750 people. And we came up with some guiding questions. And the guiding questions fell into 3 areas. The first one had to do with this justice rehab treatment piece of it. We wanted to know, how can we get more services that don't cost too much without sending people off the island? We know that people get sent off island who don't need to go off island. They go off island because we don't have what they need. We also know that residential treatment is very rarely the recommended treatment. It may sometimes be, and of course people need to go. But by and large, people could get just as good a results as the research literature is very clear on day treatment. Day treatment means you get the same thing you get in residential, you just don't live there. So if you're an addict, where do you live? Well, they're addicts, right? So we gotta have some place for you. So that was our first dilemma. If we're gonna have that interim treatment, if we're gonna be able to keep people on an island and do day treatment, and there are models for it, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we have to have safe, sober recovery housing. And there are national standards for this, so it can't just be Sandy Jackson's idea of what recovery housing needs to look like. It needs to meet the national standards. We need to know what they are. We need to be consistent. So we don't want people going, because sometimes what will happen is people will simply recommend what they've got, whether or not that's what you need. So we want people, we want their, ASAM is the American Society of Addictive Medicine. We want their recommendations to be consistent with what they actually need. We may have to serve them at a lower level because we don't have what they need, but at least we've documented it. And if we can get them what they need without sending them off island, then that's what we want to do. So that was our first objective. The second one had to do with what we do with community. How can we use community awareness to affect the norms in community? How can we find healthy gateways for people that lead to a sense of community connection? Because if people are going to get a recovery, they're going to reconnect with community. They're going to have to find a new way of being attached in our community. So that was a question we asked ourselves. And then we ask, how can we create living situations that support a person who would like to reenter the community on a healthy basis, either because they've been incarcerated or because they've gone into a life of recovery, and now they need to have a living situation that supports that life decision. So those were the 3 questions that guided these accomplishments. So one of the things you picked up this morning was a list of things we accomplished. So they all emanated from this. So we needed leadership. Well, here's what we got. We had these people to varying degrees. Ken Jass was a lead public health nurse. He deserted us and went to Fairbanks to take some higher level position. Imagine that. But that's okay, because we're still in his district. So he's still connected to us. And I'm keeping him informed about what we're doing. And he said we were mentioned at some statewide meeting recently that he attended. Of course, they had it all wrong, but we were at least mentioned. Mary Gillis-Hauger was the director of PKICC for many years. She went away to graduate school to finish some clinicals. So she's not in the mix anymore until she returns to Island. So departed but not forgotten. So these are how we've kind of arranged ourselves. So how do we do? Well, we did pretty good, actually, as a matter of fact. For a bunch of people who do it on a volunteer basis who don't have any money, we did a pretty good job. We had 30 activities and we completed 17 of them. 11 we didn't get done because it takes money. And volunteer boots on the ground people don't have money. Somebody asked me if we could pay for an advertisement in the newspaper. We have no money. We can't pay for an advertisement. So 6 got stalled, but they were going to be resolved, and we put a couple on hold, but we made some adjustments. So what you'll see here on this list that I gave you, on the front side, the top half are things that we did. I hope you're impressed. we're impressed with ourselves. This is the bragging portion of the presentation. The bottom portion are things we achieved, but which we continue as active activities. So the little lines here beside these are for you to put your initials. The backside are the ones where they're longer range objectives and they require funding. So you'll note that I indicated whether or not a professional organization would have to take the lead on it, or whether any community member or any agency or organizational affiliation could do it. So again, this is a working coalition. This is not a bystander. You know the story about bystanders, right? How if there's a whole mess of people looking at somebody getting beat up, nobody does anything. If there's one person, that person intervenes, because we always think the other guy's going to do it. Well, in this coalition, there is no other guy. Well, what about that? Well, you get tired. I mean, we're tired. This has been really hard work. But we are continuing to go. So we're still working on it. And that's why I have this little sign-up sheet, which you have in front of you. Matt will give you some input on what we're going to be doing for the next 3-year cycle. So we would love it if you signed up, because Henry Ford says that coming together is just the beginning, and that's what you're doing now. You're coming together with us. We've been together for 3 years, but you're coming into it. Keeping it together is progress, but working together is a success. So here's what it's like to keep us together. It's like herding cats. And I'm the cat herder. I put that on one of my emails one time. I don't know how well received that was. But anyway, it is like herding cats because everybody in it's really busy. They already got too much to do. And so when we devote ourselves to doing something else, we're really overloading, of course. So this is me. Sometimes that's about as good as it gets. Make it to the keyboard. So Larry Ledoux, you all know Larry Ledoux, he's the superintendent of school. He and I worked together for decades now. And he had, well, I hadn't really thought about it until he brought it up early on. He said, you know, we're getting old. Well, that one hadn't occurred to me. So he said, we can't keep this up forever, you know, because there's me and Larry and Pat, we're all in, you know, well, okay. We just won't go where we are, but let's just say we're kind of along the road on the journey. And then we've got Cleo Falcone, she's a professor, she's kind of up there. So we have a lot of us old people who had worked together for decades getting things done in coalitions and alliances. So we're perfectly comfortable with this approach. We know it can be done, but we do not have endless resources, and it's come to my attention that there is a finite number of summers in one's life. So you'll see there's some old hands here and some new hands. So what we needed were young bloods. Well, we were going to call them young guns, but then I thought that's probably not such a good idea given our particular project. So we went to young bloods. So we thought, okay, we'll work with this bunch of people and leaders will emerge. Young leaders will kind of come up to the top. And then those guys, we just need to mentor them and they'll take over. And so we did, and they did, and here they are. So here are the young bloods. What do you think? Yeah, you guys know Kim Saunders? She's the Assistant Director of Special Services at the school district. She says yes to everything, which is why Larry called me this morning. He's afraid she said yes to something else. He wanted me to know that there are other people in the district and he'd like to have some of them involved. But she's just grand. She's a Kodiak kid. She grew up here. What we are in part looking for are people who are committed to Kodiak, not their agency, not their profession, but to Kodiak. So having Kodiak kids or Kodiak people gives us a little better depth. So then we got Jill Wallace. She was Jill Bunting. She was the Adult Probation Parole Office. She came with a lot of hats on, you know, that's why she has lots of hats. She's also on the camp board and is a fundamental organizer for the Kodiak Area Mentoring Program. So she comes representing that primarily now since her switch in position, since Steve has been appointed to the bench. She has a different role within the Department of Corrections. Then we got Chief Putney, there he is. I couldn't find a better cartoon, so don't tell him about that. The whole donut thing.
He still has hair, but
I just said so.
And then Stephen Fuller. Now this is Stephen back here. Stephen's kind of an odd duck because he came back. He was here and he went away and he liked us so well he came back. So he picked us, he chose us. So he's kind of in here with the young leaders. And then there's Matt, my right-hand helper here. He's just phenomenal. This is a guy who has 3 master's degrees, and why in the heck he doesn't go ahead and get a doctorate is like one of the mysteries of the Western world. But anyway, he knows a lot of stuff. He's bright, he's energetic, he's got the vision. So he is going to have a fundamental, and he's also got more flexibility than a lot of people do, because he's kind of at the top of his piece here. So, and he's got this incredible ability to synthesize stuff. So I stuck him in the middle with all this extra business going on here. So what that means is we want you to volunteer. We do not want you to be a bystander. If you want to be part of the summit, we expect you to work. You don't have to work a lot, but you can't just hang out and bask in the glow. You got to be part of the solution. So here's the funny thing. I mean, I think you'll think this is funny. I thought it was funny. I put it on Facebook. Same little thing I sent to all of you guys. Put it on events of Kodiak. Put it on Friends of Kodiak. There are 8,457 people on Friends of Kodiak. I got 5 likes and no comments. On the events, I think I got like 4 likes, no comments. The guy who wanted a stoplight at Safeway parking lot got 104 and 94 comments. Now what is up with that? Well, I think it's because it's easy to acknowledge it's a problem. It takes a little chutzpah. I had a Jewish friend, I get to use that word, a little chutzpah, to step up and say I want to be a part of the solution and instead of just identifying the problem. So that's where we are at this stage. We want you to be part of community. We have a supplemental slogan, which is that the difference between a moment and a movement is sacrifice. I've been here since 1977, and there have been multiple tragedies, often with young people. We gather up around that tragedy and we have a moment. In fewer cases have we had a movement. So when we started the summit, we said, we will be a movement. We are not a moment. So coalitions usually last at the max 3 years. So we're going into our 4th. Now I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's going to explain what we need to do to keep going, to keep reconceptualizing ourselves, reinventing ourselves, being this active process. So if, at the end of his presentation, then we'll take questions. Is that okay with everybody? So far, so good? Thank you. Okay, Matt, you're on. Let me get my water.
All right, good morning, everyone. So, as Sandy mentioned earlier, everyone has a different perspective, they have a different background, they see things through a different window. So now I'm gonna let you look into mine a little bit, and it's gonna be interesting. So, first, I wanna talk to you a little bit about coalitions. Sandy mentioned a lot, but just to recap, at its core, a coalition is a group, individuals, agencies, whatever it might be, that comes together to accomplish some type of objective or task. Now, to kind of understand where the summit was and where we want to take it and how we want you all to be involved, I want to talk a little bit about how coalitions are often structured. So one of the terms that you may have heard before that gets thrown around a lot is called collective impact. And it's the idea of everybody getting together, pooling their resources, and then having a greater impact than any one person or agency. In order to be a true collective impact effort, you typically need a common agenda, shared measurement systems, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and then a backbone support organization. So basically what that means is everybody's on the same page, everybody is recording information and using the same metrics to determine how much progress is being made. Everybody is working together, you don't have a lot of duplication, so Instead of 3 organizations doing the same thing, one organization is doing part A, another one's part B, the third one is part C. All of those organizations are communicating with each other, which we're gonna get to in a minute why that's important. And then the backbone support organization is usually some type of overarching organization or a committee or a government agency or something that basically directs everything. They're the ones who are sitting there saying, hey, get this done. Hey, I need you to focus on this. Now, for a variety of reasons, most communities can't put together a true collective impact organization. So instead, we have this thing, which is called the Community Systems Solutions Framework, because names have to be complicated. So basically the way this works is it's a quadrant system that's run on 2 scales based on engagement between various sectors in a community, so healthcare, law enforcement, youth service programs, whatever else you might have. Sandi had mentioned a big one that we would love to get involved here, and we have great representation so far, is the faith community. And then it's also based on governance. So who or how is this being driven forward? Now, currently, for the past couple of years, the summit has been kind of a hybrid. We've fallen somewhere between 1 and 2. So in terms of the community-led coalition, we didn't have a lot of buy-in from other industry sectors. We had the law enforcement piece, we had the healthcare piece, the behavioral health piece. We didn't have a ton of buy-in from those other areas. But we had really strong ties to Kodiak. As she said, kind of the core leadership of the summit is people who were born here, they were raised here, or at the very least, they spent a lot of time here. They're vested. Then we also have aspects of the low overhead coalition. Namely, there was kind of a lack of communication between partners. Everything got funneled through Sandi. So, and I can attest to that. I was, Sandi says that I've been kind of an up-and-coming leader in the summit. I've taken this big role and I completely stumbled into it. And it started out from, hey, you should come to this meeting because you run the prevention department, to suddenly now I'm in charge of things. And so I communicated and I worked with a couple other agencies on certain things, but for the most part, we were kind of working on our separate pieces, and then it would all get funneled to Sandi, and then we would determine next steps, okay, what's everyone gonna work on, and then we would all go our separate ways again until our next meeting. But we had very passionate leadership because Sandi made sure that we were actually doing that. So we made progress, but not necessarily as much as we would have wanted or we could have. And this is just a big long list of some of the people who are involved in that. And as we're going down, you'll notice that a lot of it is, like I said, representative of very specific sectors in the community. Now, that made a lot of sense at the time because of the things we were focusing on. For example, we didn't have a ton of participation from the school district because a lot of the things that we were focusing on didn't have to do with the outcome and the impact on kids. It was focused more on the treatment side, the law enforcement side. But moving into the next couple years, our work plan has kind of changed. Right now, we have 4 goals: promoting awareness of the risks of substance use among youth and engaging them in the process, reducing stigma associated with having a loved one who's struggling with substance use, addiction, or mental health issues, provide healthy opportunities, resiliency development, and healthy attachments for residents, and then providing timely, effective intervention for youth when substance use indicators are present. Now, the second handout that you got is the 2019 through 2022 Summit Action Plan objectives. You'll notice that we have those goals. Within each of those goals, there's various objectives. Within each objective, there's a bunch of action plans. So even though these are kind of our overarching things, we have a huge array of different ways that we're trying to approach this problem. So no matter what agency or what organization or what background you come from, there's some way for you to get involved and to participate. Now, even though we finalized this work plan in the fall of 2019, which is why all my things say it's the 2020 through 2022 work plan, we've already been making really good progress. For example, one of the objectives we had was to provide social media and digital risk awareness training to both teens and adults. So specifically for parents, so that way, what kind of apps are my kids using? What are some of the risks associated with it? What are things I should be looking for or be aware of? And this is something that we currently have in development. As the head of Cannabis Prevention Department, my team oversees and takes point on planning the village community health fairs. So I deal with a lot of our village outreach stuff. So we're working on trying to incorporate this into the village health fairs. We're trying to incorporate it into other community events that we participate in. We're trying to find somebody in the state or even out of state who is a really, really good speaker on this topic to bring them here for the 2020 Community Health Summit that we're planning in September. Expanding youth program services in village communities. That's another one of my pet projects. It works really well with my job, so I'm able to make a lot of forward momentum on that. And that's basically just reaching out to our village communities and saying, what can we do to improve outcomes for the kids? When it comes to bystander intervention training in schools, the peer counseling project at Kodiak High School, the Women's Resource Center has been doing an amazing job. The bystander intervention training is a great example of that. Next month, not next month, it's still February, sometime in April, they are going to be teaching a bystander intervention curriculum that they've been developing to all the 7th and 8th graders. By fall of 2020, it's going to be 5th through 12th grade every year. Same thing, the peer counseling project, that's something that they're working on. I'm sure all of you are aware when teenagers hear something from an adult, it has potentially some impact. But when they're hearing it from their friends, it's way, way more impactful, and it has a lot more meaning behind it. So developing that peer-to-peer counseling program is probably going to go, based on the research and what we've seen before from similar programs, we're hoping that it's going to go a long way to improving the environment of the high school and then hopefully eventually the middle school. The Women's Resource Center also has a teen advisory panel that they put together, which is basically providing them with feedback about all the activities and things that are available in the community and ways that we can better engage with and reach the youth. Finally, this training. The Hazelden trainings that we have coming up, these orientation trainings, these are a really good opportunity for us because we get to tell all of you about the things that we have done, the things that we're hoping to do, and how you can get involved. And we really hope that all of you will. Now, jumping back a little bit to that coalition model, I said earlier that we were kind of a hybrid on that left-hand side. We want to start shifting toward a multi-stakeholder coalition, which those are the descriptions. Basically, it has diverse stakeholders. So we want to get buy-in from all those agency sectors. We want a decentralized organizational system. We don't want to have to rely on Sandi to force us to do things. We want to make sure that as we're moving forward, that the agencies, the partners, the individuals who are involved are communicating with each other in an effective and regular manner. So that way, we can make good progress on this. As Sandi said, we had a huge list of accomplishments in the last 3 years. Hopefully the next 3 will be even better. Strong inter-party communication, high self-initiation, that again goes back to not relying on Sandi to poke us with a stick, and then the harmonization of agendas. Basically, we all need to make sure that we're on the same page, that we're all moving in the same direction. So, for example, because of the stuff we have in the work plan here, we have a variety of desired partners. You know, things like Parks and Rec, the Young Life program, the Baptist Mission, Girl and Boy Scouts, local businesses, tribal partners, OCS, DJJ, the faith community, everybody else. Those first couple of years, we were focused on the treatment and law enforcement and the justice piece. So the partners we had then made sense. The next 3 years, we're focusing very heavily on youth in the community. So these are the partners, these are some of the organizations that we really need to get involved if we want to have that impact. So how do we make that transition happen? Well, first, bring in the relevant partners, have dedicated task groups. So as I said, if we want to become more decentralized, if we want to make good progress on all of these things simultaneously, we need to be getting groups of people together to work on those. That's where your sign-in sheets come in. If you guys sign up for things, then somebody from the summit will be bothering you about it later. Not bothering, engaging.
Engage.
So, regular communication within the groups. So if you choose to engage, you're going to be engaged. Dedicating the time and effort to initiatives. We mentioned that. Part of that has to do with synergizing with your work efforts. Sandi mentioned that one of the reasons that I can be so heavily involved is because I have a lot of flexibility. That's because this is my job. And so I know that's not the case for a lot of people. You have a lot of responsibilities, but that's why we want to get the agencies and the people who are already working with this population, working with youth, working with families. We want to get them engaged. And even if they're not necessarily working with that, there's always going to be crossover because of the topic we're dealing with. So if there are ways that we can align what the summit is doing or what you're doing with the summit, the more the better. And then finally, again, that idea, making sure we're all going in the same direction, that we all have the same agendas. I know that's difficult. The more agencies you get in the same room, the trickier it can be. But I like to think, at least, that we all have kind of the same overarching concept. We want to make Kodiak a better place. So that being said, you have the list of the objectives, you have the list of the goals, some of the action items and everything. It's a work in progress. It's not set in stone. It's going to evolve over time. It's going to change as things come up, as we look at some of these options or objectives and action steps deeper. They're going to change, they're going to alter. So it's a living document. Sandi mentioned that we have 2 large leadership team meetings a year. We have the all-day work day, all-day work summit, whatever. All summit work day, something like that. Task groups, as they're meeting, they're going to be modifying objectives. Again, maintaining that focus on the end goal. So even if you see something here and you're not quite sure where you fit, we can make modifications. We can find a place for you. Please get involved, get engaged. Because even if there isn't necessarily something that jumps out at you right now that says, oh, I can do that, maybe there's something connected to it. Maybe something has to grow. Maybe we add something new. And that's it for my piece.
So I want to just emphasize that the coalition is not just about drugs and alcohol. That was our commitment at the get-go, is that that's the presenting issue for the community. In 2016, that was the presenting issue. We want a body of movers and shakers that are going to make Kodiak healthier and are going to address whatever challenge happens to come. It just so happens that right now we're looking at the opioid methamphetamine issue. But we want people who can think beyond that, who can think to the health of the community and are ready to work together. And so again, back to this graying coalition that I referred to, we have worked together on multiple projects that fell slightly outside our primary domain or agency affiliation because we are community, because this is home. So if you join us, we may not be focusing exactly on your domain just now, but in the future, your expertise may be the very thing that helps guide us in the right direction. So we want people who are committed beyond their job. We don't want you to be told. Now, Matt's talking about how we can get a coalition that's sustainable over time. We do believe that agencies are going to have to commit to having certain positions, be committed to being active in the summit. Because as you saw, some of our longer range objectives, they require money. If we're going to have a building where people can live while they're in treatment, that's money. One of the other things we need is a sleep-off center. That takes money. One of the things we need is ambulatory detox. That's for people who are getting ready to go into treatment. It's different from a sleep-off center, but who need to have an ambulatory detox. We do ambulatory detox in our community, but we don't have a place for people to live while they're engaged in that process. So that's a piece that's missing. And our long range goal in the 5 to 10 years is a family court, behavioral health court, whatever term you want to give to it, which is one of those incredibly effective devices that communities use to save money, to save lives, to save the integrity of their citizens. But the community must have a solid infrastructure in order to support that. There's money to be had. I've talked with people about how to get the grants for drug, it's there. We do not have the infrastructure to support it. So that is in part what the coalition is trying to do, is to get that continuum of services in place so that that can be a viable alternative. So sort of circling back to the chief's comment, if we're not going to arrest ourselves out of this, then we are going to have to provide gateways to reintegration into community in a healthy way. And that would be through something like a behavioral health and family court for domestic violence, substance abuse, OCS kinds of cases, things of that sort. But we've got to have an infrastructure that will support it. So again, the Hazleton Betty Ford event is a developmental opportunity for us to get ourselves a little extra oomph to go in the right direction. The two domains that this aspect of our work as a coalition has not engaged, in addition to the faith community, and we are so happy to have you here, is the recovery community. So we need the voice of recovery, and we need the voice of people who love someone who's still struggling. Now, those groups of people have a cohesiveness among themselves, but we do not have access to their voice. So I spoke with the Parents of Addicts. There's a Parents of Addicts group. It's a Facebook presence, but it also meets. So I met with them last week. Some of those Parents of Addicts are going to be coming to some of the orientations, and they'll be joining us on the 25th. So hopefully we'll have input from them, ideas, thoughts. They'll join in our process. Those of you who are going back to community will have the voice of recovery and the voice of those struggling when you go back to your community. And so we want to be able to have this full perspective. If we are going to get the picture so that we know what we need to do, we need to walk all the way around the problem and look through all those different windows. So, questions for us? Oh, come on, guys. Surely you have questions.
I have one.
Oh, good, good.
Hey, you're not gonna like it.
Oh, I have, go ahead. I like all questions.
So, you guys are a non-governmental
Yeah.
organization,
Yeah,
right?
we have no
We do have
credibility.
the people who can help. You can see it's a full classroom, to say it that way. But we don't have the resources to really go through this journey. What I'm saying, what I'm gonna come down to, we're gonna help addicts because our community has been full of this problem that we know, but we don't have a rehab center
Thank
in
you.
town.
Okay, let me speak to
So how
that.
can we do that in
Well,
a short term?
we did talk about that a little bit up here. So here's what we got going. The first thing we did was increase our intensive outpatient capacity. So we now have a larger intensive outpatient program than we had before. One of the problems that was brought to us as a coalition is that most of the people who are having substance abuse problems also have comorbidities. That means they've got a mental health problem as well, 2 diagnoses. So if you're going to treat them, you need to treat both. So we now have at CANA a group for comorbidities, an intensive outpatient program for comorbidities. And I think, and Phil can tell us this, Phil, are you guys, Phil, Jordanelli?
Yes.
Are you guys are adding a second IOP, right? Or thinking about
Yes,
it.
we have the 2 IOP group capacity right now.
Okay.
Cover now, yeah.
And you're thinking about adding a new one? Is that the scoop I hear?
We have the capacity soon at our facility. So we're modifying our facility to have a larger intensive outpatient program and a co-occurring program and an outpatient program. That's still outpatient. So yes.
Yeah,
we're
so what we want,
increasing-
so the next step for CANA and/or PKICC is what's called day treatment. Day treatment or partial hospitalization means you get the same treatment you'd get if you were in residential treatment. You just don't sleep there, because that's where the liability comes in, and that's where the money comes in, and that's what makes it cost prohibitive. So one of the things Hazel is doing back in Minnesota is they have a day treatment program where and a residential program where there are people go to the same services they get in residential treatment, they just sleep in a place where they pay room and board, which is a heck of a lot cheaper than paying for residential treatment. So it makes it cost effective. So I talked to Kodiak Island Housing Authority. They're willing to talk with us about building the building. So that's the first piece. We have to have a building. If you're an addict and you decide to go into recovery, where do you sleep? It doesn't matter if you've got really great resources to treat you during the daytime. If you have nowhere to sleep at night, chances are you're going to be sleeping with other addicts. Well, that's going to compromise your consistency in treatment. So we want a safe and sober place, but we need a building. So first things first, we got to get a building. Once we got a building, then CANA and PKICC have got the capacity to do programming. Kodiak Island Housing Authority wants us to know that they do buildings. They don't do program. I said, we know program. So give us a building, we will do program. So that's our next step. The other piece after that is the ambulatory detox, the sleep-off center, those kinds of places in town where people can go and stay alive and safe while they access what we have. Most people who are sent off island to residential treatment don't really need that level of care. They could be served at this cheaper, more compassionate level of care within community. And that's especially important for folks from the village, for example, because it allows them to have access to a support system that they're going to use when they get back home. Because it's easy to be sober in a residential program. It's much more difficult to be sober in community. So we got to teach people how to live in recovery. HIMSS, Hazelton's, creating and sustaining a community culture of recovery. There was a question.
You said that, my name's Luke, by the way, I'm a student at St. Herman's. You said earlier that you've had difficulty in the past getting cooperation from clergy, and I'm wondering why you think that is and what we can do better.
Thank you for the question. It was ours as well. Well, we figured, okay, maybe we just sound like a bunch of, treatment cop type people, so maybe we're not appealing. So we put together a presentation that was only for clergy. I sent a letter to every church in town. I called them, I texted them. We're doing it down in the library, neutral territory, on a Saturday afternoon where the working pastors could come, 1 to 3 o'clock. I'm down there, I'm ready to go, I have a co-facilitator. Nobody came. So when I talked to Hazelton about putting this thing together, I said, we can't get the faith community. I don't know what to do. Got any ideas? They said, you are not alone. In our national work, we discovered that the faith community does not engage as actively as all the other domains in a community. I said, why? They said, well, in part because they don't know where to connect to the effort. So we're reconceptualizing a little bit, and of course we do have clergy here today, for which we're very grateful. And what we're thinking at this point is that it may be easier for churches and clergy people to engage with specific tasks. This is not to trivialize your contribution or potential contribution, but it's kind of like making sandwiches for Brother Francis. That a person can do, right? So each one, I'm a Catholic, so my hero is Mother Teresa. She says not very many of us are going to do great things. We can all do small things with great love. So if I make a sandwich with great love, that's my part. So we know that the faith communities have a role to play. If we get to this partial hospitalization piece, we're going to need spiritual advisors, because that is a component of that level of treatment, is not to overlook the spiritual domain. Many people believe that addiction is in essence a spiritual disorder. And we are obviously working to use a 12-step model because that's where the support's going to come from, and that acknowledges the higher power. So we really, really are going to need the connections to faith communities. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we're thinking that if we can give specific things where clergy people can, it kind of resonates for them. The Hazelton presenter suggested that in some denominations, there's a moralistic issue that still comes into play with addiction and alcoholism and things of that sort. I don't really think that's a play here in Kodiak because we are so connected, but I could understand where that might be an obstacle in larger places. Yeah.
Yes. Well, my name is Ivan. I'm a seminary here also, and when you were talking about the treatment facilities, have you guys looked at the other, like in the Bethel area, since they do have a treatment program that's in full swing, they house?
Now, Phil, you guys do refer to Bethel sometimes, right?
Yeah, residential
That's
program.
one, yeah. So,
And
yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I'm asking you, because I see you were presenting that also, and that you were saying that, Candace helping you started getting a building and for.
Housing Authority is actually the
Yeah.
one that's going to hopefully try to do that, yeah.
Well, that'd be a very good step.
Well, we are going to make sure that we meet the national standards for residences. And there is a national, there are 2 models that are attached to this national standard. What we know is that it's not just a building, it's also a program that exists within the building. So you gotta have people monitored, you gotta have UAs, you gotta have check-ins, you gotta have groups, you gotta have meetings, blah, 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 blah. You gotta have a whole, thing going on. And you have to meet the national standards, and if we don't meet the national standards, you're not gonna get any money. So we're gonna follow the money.
Yeah, where you're speaking, right, when you're talking, it brings back, how the program how it started. It started with the people in the corporations getting together to start this
Right.
treatment program.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's what we want here. We want a day treatment program, and if we get to that point, it's going to be because everybody collaborates. One agency is not going to do day treatment. That's not going to work. We're not that good. None of us are that good. We're going to have people from the public health department. We're going to have spiritual advisors. We're going to have clinicians. We're going to have substance abuse counselors. We're going to have case managers. We're going to have health coaches. We're going to have a whole bunch of people. We're going to have people helping with pain management, for example, because a lot of people got addicted via a prescription for legitimate pain. We're going to have everybody on the team. And again, those of us who have been around for a while have seen this happen. Kodiak was the first community in Alaska to have a K-12 health curriculum. We don't have a K-12 health curriculum anymore, but we were the first one to have the whole K-12 thing. And the reason it worked is because we worked at a multi-agency level and brought in people from all the agencies into the schools to prevent the health pieces. It worked. When I first came here, I was an OCS worker. I took kids out of people's homes and put them in foster care, and the Kodiak Baptist Mission at that time was a residential program. Well, we were doing really good custodial care, but we weren't doing treatment, and the needs for kids were increasing. They needed treatment, not just residents. So the school district, Kodiak Baptist Mission Mental Health Center, where I worked, which was down below me, and the OCS worker, which was me, and the probation officer, and all the people got in town, and we brought in people to show us different models. We selected teaching family model out of Boys Town. My husband and I went to Boys Town and got nationally certified. The Baptist Mission invited me to come back and change them. I'm a Catholic. They're Baptist. I was the first non-Protestant person they'd ever had, so that was like an adjustment. But that worked well, and we transitioned to treatment. Now, since then, the Baptist Mission has gone in a different direction. But I mention this to point out that this was a collaborative effort. The same thing with programs for the developmentally disabled. That was a 5-agency project when it first got started. Now Hope Cottages has it. Same thing for CSP. I directed the CSP program that tailed onto the DD program, the developmental disabled. Again, multi-agency. We had a Region 8 grant. Region 8 doesn't even exist anymore, but that was a youth-oriented coalition of like 16 agencies in town that got together to try to deal with what was happening with gangs coming into town at that time, to deal with activities, lots of different things. So we know, those of us who have been here know that this can be done. We can do this too. We can create a community culture of recovery. But that means that people have to step outside their comfort zone. They can't guard their turf, hoard their resources, duplicate services. They can't be the be-all and end-all answer. As Matt's talking about, we've got to have this multi-stakeholder, am I using the right thing?
Yes.
Yes. And enough organizational or governmental clout to be able to get the resources and funds that we need to have to go in the direction we already know we need to go. Other questions? Comments? Input? You're all signing up, right? I don't see any signatures on some of these pages, people. I told you this is not a bystander coalition. There's people, now, you might not, if you just like some of those things, if they just kind of appeal to you, sign up. We'll just give you a little small thing to do. If you don't have much time, that's okay. We don't mind.
Is there a community or city that you guys see as a model that
Yeah,
you feel like?
Heck yeah, you bet.
Researching a little bit.
Us,
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, I love that.
When I first came to Kodiak back in '77, a few years in there, some colleagues from the Department of Justice, from the Mental Health Center, from the school district, and we presented at a national conference, the National Child Welfare League, and it was called Don't Tell Me It Can't Be Done. And it was on teamwork. And people said, oh, you can only do that because you're in Kodiak and you're small. That's not true. We can do that because we're committed to do it. Small communities can be just as turf guarding as anybody else. So our model, we know it will work, which is why we're recruiting these young people to have their energy to keep it going. And we do want it to be a movement which we understand involves sacrifice. So, you're welcome. In fact, we've been told that we may be the model for Alaska. And so we're going to get some coverage here. But some of the governmental agencies and higher up, Alaska Mental Health Board and Substance Abuse, the Addiction Advisory Board, have suggested that Kodiak may be able to provide a model for other communities to follow. Of course, we're still developing ours, and Hazelton wants it to be clear. They've asked me to tell you this. We are not coming to tell you how to do it, because we don't know how you need to do it. We are coming to offer some ideas, but we are not the experts. So, they're not the experts on Kodiak, they're the experts on what they're coming. So we're going to take what they have to give us, and we are going to see how it works for Kodiak, and try to put that together. So the next step, after the 225 meeting, is going to be, for those of you who are in a position to take advantage of the trauma-informed care, which will not be all of you, but we'll have that. And then the first part of May, first week of May we're looking at? Isn't that what you suggested?
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, we're going to have an all-summit meeting. And so we're going to come back together and try to use some of this new information, integrate it into the action plan that we have now that you've heard about, and see where that all fits and where we can go forward for the next 3 years. I'm sorry, there was a question. Sorry.
Before that, and as I mentioned during my portion of the presentation, if you are interested in participating in the summit, if you're interested in engaging with us, but looking through that list of things that we have on our 2020-2022 work plan, if you don't see anything that jumps out, coming to that work day in May, that is one of the few times when we get everyone who's involved, not just the summit leadership, and that is really your opportunity to say, hey, I'd like to see this added, I'd like to see this modified, I think this is a way that we can approach this problem. And so if nothing jumps out at you now, that doesn't mean it never will. And so that All Summit Workday is the perfect opportunity to provide that input, to give us your perspective.
And there are many small tasks that need to be done. One of the things you'll see on there is that we created a flyer that had to do with all the resources that were, the parents might be interested in knowing about, and a calendar of all the parent training and groups. Well, I made the flyer, but I had a knee replacement, so I couldn't run all over town passing them out. Somebody had to pass them out. Well, as it so happens, my son is a teacher, and his wife is a teacher, and they had the summer off, so they folded, and my grandchildren folded the folders, and then my son and his wife and my husband delivered them to all the places that needed to have them. Small things with great love. So if you just like something that's on there, I assure you there's some aspect of it that's not going to take a heck of a lot of time, but will make all the difference in the world. If those flyers aren't in the hands of people who can use them, they're useless.